Welcome to Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, chapter 33, Feeling God, Feeling Joy. And welcome back to the regular class, because the last class that we had was given by Rabbi Miller on chapter 32, and he did a phenomenal job. I'm glad that you all enjoyed, and I got lots of feedback from lots of people that really liked. And in this week's chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to discuss the idea of true joy. In other words, in chapter 32, the Alter Rebbe took a little break. It actually doesn't even really fit in so much with the series. I think Rabbi Miller spoke about that. It was added in afterwards, right before the Tanya went to print. That spoke about true love of a fellow Jew, which goes into positive emotions, and it follows the thread of the concept of making your body less of import and more about your soul, and focusing more on the spiritual in our lives, etc. Great. But right immediately prior to that, the Alter Rebbe was talking in chapter 31. The Alter Rebbe was trying to give us tips, because remember that was the first one of positive emotions, which came off of 4 intense classes about negative emotions. So after we had spoken about depression and suffering, etc., we started talking about joy and love and and that kind of thing. And in this week's chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to continue the conversation where he left off at the end of chapter 31. In chapter 31, we introduced how we could convert maybe a depressing situation to joyous, how we can use depression or sadness as a catalyst for joy, and how we can go from depression to joy. In this week's chapter, this week's lesson, the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about, without anything, how we can be joyous people. Joy is supposed to be something that's not dependent on any particular action, right? Last time, which was about a month ago, we spoke about how a mitzvah can channel, how your depression can channel you to action towards a mitzvah, which can lead to joy, and it can be this whole journey. But here the Alter Rebbe wants to know, how can I have an intrinsic joy? How can I be a happy person? Now, before we start the lesson, I want to say that this is something that Chabad is a little bit obsessed with. Dennis Prager likes to say, I love to quote him, that in the Chabad headquarters in New York, they have a little room with a whole bunch of computers, and they monitor all the Chabad rabbis around the world. And they each have a joy level, and the joy level always has to be at 100%. The moment that they hear that there's a Chabad rabbi that's not happy, right? Because he's all into happiness. He has the happiness hour and this, right? You ever listened to Dennis Prager? Yeah. He has like the happiness hour. He's very into happiness. So he says, the moment they hear that a Chabad rabbi is not happy, Chabad headquarters goes into emergency mode, and they send out some sort of thing, whatever, and that Chabad rabbi is never heard. The Chabad rabbi leaves, and a new Chabad rabbi takes his place, who's very happy, and that Chabad rabbi is never heard from again. It's just the way he likes to say it. He says that Chabad rabbis have to be happy. Now, I will not comment on whether such a room exists in Chabad Central and whether this way of keeping our rabbis is true or not. But I will comment that Chassidus places such a great emphasis on joy that back in the day, the times of the Alter Rebbe, which we discussed at length on Yutas Kislev, right? When there was conflict about Chassidus and many people were opposed to Chassidus, the Misnagdim, which were those that were against the Chassidim, would call the Chassidim, in an attempt to be derogatory, Difreilecha, the joyous ones. In other words, they are the ones who are happy no matter what, and they're never serious, etc. Now, obviously, that latter part, that they're never serious, is not true. The Chassidim, however, place such a great emphasis, not just on being joyous in certain situations, or being joyous, but on an intrinsic joy, that we should be happy. As people, we should be happy. Chassidus introduced this concept that happiness is not something that we shouldn't pursue certain things as a means to being happy, but that happiness is the avodah itself. Happiness is the work itself. Happiness is the journey. In other words, the work should be on being happy, not on something else which makes you happy. And this is one of the things the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about today. Are we ready? Let's dive right into it. So first of all, the Alter Rebbe says that obviously, like anything else in this world, true joy, like true anything else, is not dependent on something else. It's not dependent on an action. It's not dependent on a mood. It's not dependent on a certain frame of mind. It's not dependent on a certain action or certain being around certain people, etc. Of course, all these things affect our joy, but true joy is not dependent on any of those things. True joy, you can be on an island without any of your material possessions. You could somehow be joyous. Right? It's a choice. It's a choice. It's something that we can do that can be inherently connected to us, and something that if we choose to, doesn't change. In general, when Chassidus talk about truth, right, anything true, emes, truth is something that doesn't change. The Talmud is famous for quoting about these rivers. There's these interesting rivers. I've never seen them. They've heard them scientifically. Amazingly, because how we talk about 7 rivers. They're called the Hodas HaMachazim. They're called the false rivers. Why? Because the water would flow and flow and flow, and it was living water and live water, until once every 7 years, the water would stop and it wouldn't be flowing. And that made these waters, they're not really true living water. Not true living water, they're always moving, right? This water was not true living water, it's false. It comes from something else. It's not from live water from the ocean or from the spring. Why? So forget the whole analogy for a second, but what's the point here? What's the Gemara trying to say? Truth. Anything that's true joy, true depression, true being, true Torah being true, anything, God being true, anything that's true lasts forever. It's not dependent on something. It doesn't change based on the whims or the times or whatever, right? That's why one of the 13 principles of the Rambam is that the Rambam says that part of the 13 principles of faith is that Torah hazu lo tehei muchlefet, that we believe that the Torah is true. The Torah will never be changed. It never was changed. It never will be changed. We change. And as a result, there's different ways for us to interact with the Torah. But the Torah is always entirely the same. Not just in every letter, but in the way it affects the world. Right?
The bestseller.
It's the best-selling book of all time, the Bible, right? Yes. Emet means truth. And another reference that we can find into the word emet is that, I know this is not a lesson on truth, but let's just wrap up this particular thing. We'll call it a little bit parenthetical. The word emet is made up of 3 letters, Aleph, Mem, and Taf. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Taf is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and Mem is the one smack dab in the center. And the idea is because truth goes forever, from the beginning till the end and through the middle. There's no break in it. Another point is that our sages point out is that the word for falsehood is sheker, right? Now, what do these 3 letters have in common?
The alphabet before Taf.
That's true, but what do they have? What do they have in common? That none of them can stand on their own. See, they all have one little point. Sheker, falsehood, never stands forever. Emet, which is Aleph, and then Mem. I'm doing my best here. And then Taf, they all have a very firm base. You see that? Sorry, pardon the lack of drawing skills. They didn't teach it to us in the medical school. Emet has a firm base on the bottom that it stands forever. Fine. So based on this, end of the parenthetical. So based on this understanding of the fact that truth is something that lasts forever, so obviously true joy, besides for lasting forever, right? True joy will be something that's not dependent on anything external of us, but will be actually connected to us, right? Will be actually something that's not dependent on a certain action. I do this and this makes me happy, and that's why I do it so often. Although I encourage you to do so, if it's something that makes you happy, that's a positive thing to do. You help other people, it makes you happy, it's a great thing to do. But if we want to find true joy in our lives, true happiness, right? So we have to find something that's actually connected to who we are. What does Chassidus tell us? What does Tanya tell us? Who are we? Chelek Elokami Ma'al Mamash, right? Piece of God Himself. A neshama. We have a neshama inside of us. So the Alter Rebbe begins by saying, if you want to get to true joy, there's a 3-step process. Number 1, he says, is meditation on the non-duality of the world. And that can be expounded, says the Alter Rebbe. You can sit and you can think about how intrinsically God is connected with the world. What are we getting to? We're getting to the fact that it is close to you. Remember, we spoke about how everything that the Tanya is trying to teach you. Hashem is very close to you, says the Alter Rebbe. It's obvious that somebody's going to feel alone, right? One of the things that makes a person least happy is when a person feels alone, right? Of course, we're going to feel alone. Right? We're not talking about loneliness here in this world between physical human beings or physical, right, companionship here in this world. Even if a person is alone in this world, in other words, doesn't have a companion, doesn't have a spouse, etc., but a person is never alone because always connected to Hashem. What does that mean? Not just connected to Hashem, but Hashem is close to them. And this can really be driven home by meditating on the non-duality of the world. We here at the Tanya class know this already from prior classes, that the non-duality of the world talks about the fact that Hashem in this world is not a separate being, not a separate entity. One example we've given prior, which the Alter Rebbe recaps and reviews here, is that just as by a human being, right, the words that he says before he speaks them, right, but not only that, before it even comes out into actual words in his mind, and it's still just a thought, and it's like a potential for thought inside his mind, and the person himself are completely one, right? And by a human being, once those words come out of him, we can't take those words back, right? We all know that. At some point in our lives, we've learned that the hard way. By Hashem, we famously say in the liturgy every single morning in the prelims and the preliminary prayers, we say, Atahu, Ad Shalom Nivra Ha'olam, you are He. In other words, you are the same until the world was created. Ve'atahu Misha Nivra Ha'olam, and you are the same after or once the world was created. In other words, there's no change in God before and after. Godliness because He fills the entire world, right? And there is no space that doesn't have godliness. So nothing changes before and afterwards. So if you think about how one and how private and how close your thoughts, even before they arise to you, are in your mind, never mind that they already arose as a thought and then filtered themselves down into actual words and limited themselves into words that you spoke, and then so by Hashem, all that is true when He creates the world, but the world and He are all the same, are all one, right? When we recognize this is meditation number one, which we can realize how close we are to Hashem. It should bring about an immense joy about how much the Creator is really one. We are one with the Creator. Another analogy that the Alter Rebbe adds here, which really comes from later in time, but the Alter Rebbe references here, is the sun. Think about the fact that a ray of sunlight, yeah? We always see rays of sunlight, right? You can be sitting outside and you're in your car and face the wrong way, right? Also the sun is glaring in your eyes. Right? There's a ray of sunlight that is made all the way down to you. How many miles is the sun away from us? Anybody?
93 million.
Here we go, 93 million miles away from us. And there's a ray that's coming all the way down to us. Clearly, that's not the sun itself. If the sun itself was inside my car, not that I wouldn't be able to drive, I'm not sure I'd be able to do anything else. Right? So it's clearly just a ray of the sun. Think about that ray, which seems right now to be a very powerful existence. It's blocking my view. I can't even see the cars coming across from me. It's making me warm, right? In a positive way, in a negative way. It could be doing whatever the ray of the sun is doing. It's filling my house with light, right? That ray of the sun is such a force. It's such a real existence. We can see it. Yet think of that ray of sun before it emanates from the sun. There's nowhere in the sun that you can point to and say, this is ray number 92, 22, 3, 4, 1, that's the one that ends up in my living room. Right? There's nowhere you can point to. There's no such thing. It's just the sun. And then the ray that comes out, all of a sudden becomes a whole existence for us. Right? So by the sun, it's true. There are two separate existences. By Hashem, the world is just like the ray of sun as it is still inside the sun. That's how
Like
non-existent the world is.
Part of the ocean.
Exactly. No, it's not true, even more. There's a drop of the ocean. When it's inside the ocean, you could point to it. Technically, you could point to it and say, here it is. I think in today's day and age, you can take a microscope, right? If you take one red drop of water.
The drop does not think that it has to fend for itself.
It doesn't think that it's to fend for itself, but it has an existence, right? The point here is that the ray of sunlight, there's no way, even with a microscope, there's nowhere that you can inside the sun itself. That's why that's the analogy to use. The drop of water, I would imagine that if we were talented enough and we had a microscope and we'd be able to follow along with it, that drop of water still exists somewhere, right? I think. I don't know exactly how these things work, but it seems to me that not to be exactly the same.
But
The point stands.
yeah, as far as the rays of the sun, they are one and the same with the sun.
Absolutely. Inside the sun, there's no question. It's not even.
In fact, we are in the sun because we receive the rays of the sun. It's part of the.
But yet we call them rays.
Yeah, we call them rays because,
So something else is here now.
but it's not really a separate thing that is just.
Well, that's the point. 100%.
It is a continuation.
I think the point that you're making is something that Hasidus talks about the difference between koyach and oir. The oir, light, is something that's always directly connected to its source.
Yes.
For instance, the sun's rays can never be different than the sun. There's no way that a ray can come out, right? Whereas a child that comes out of a father, also something that emanates from the father, right, can be very different than his father. He'll have similarities, because he comes from the father. Everything he gets, he takes from the father. But he can be different because it's not a connected topic for a whole different time. Now, but the point we're getting to is that in this place, this moment, right, time, space, us, existence, is all really godly. And we're so close to Hashem. That should make us extremely, extremely joyous. That should make us extremely happy. That's point number one. Point number two, says the Alter Rebbe, is let's think about why we are here. Why did God work so hard, right, quote, to create this world, right? So meditation number one is how close we are to Hashem. Meditation number two is how lucky we are to be in this world, that Hashem chose to create us and to give us purpose in this world, right? And here goes the reason behind a lot of the physical and seemingly mundane actions which make us happy, right? Which is making this world a dwelling place for Hashem. The Alter Rebbe is not going to elaborate on it in this chapter, but we have learned this before, and we've definitely referenced this before, that the point of us coming down to this world, the point of the creation of the world was to create a dwelling place for Hashem. Right? That this world should be a home for Hashem. Imagine if I told you... What? According to most opinions, that's not the final conclusion. That is one of the reasons that's given among the Kabbalists, but most of them, the conclusion is, in most places in the Kabbalah, the conclusion is she's referring to a different. Basically, there's a discussion about what the purpose of the creation of the world was. And the Kabbalists are, I think, generally three different schools of thought. Number one is Lehitiv and Ibrahim. God literally, because God is the ultimate good, and Teva Tov Lehitiv, goodness wants to share. So God wanted to share His goodness with other people, and that with something outside of Him. So therefore, He had to create something outside of Him, or at least something that seems outside of Him, in order to share with Him. That's one reason for creation of the world that's given. Another one is Koach Ma'asav Higid La'amo. God wanted to show how great He really is. In order to show how great He is, He has to make something else in order to tell that something else how great He is, and that other thing should realize how great He is. But number three, and the one that's accepted by most Hasidic sources and Kabbalistic sources, is Dira Lo Yitbarech B'Tachtonim, which comes from the Medrash in Tanchuma, which quotes what it says in Tanakh, I forget exactly where, that Shokav Amudei Shesh, which is, in Hebrew, literally that means that his thighs are thighs of marble. But the words can be read slightly different, and instead of Shokek, it's Shokav, it's Shokek, Nishtokek, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu desired, he had this extreme desire within him, which is really, when you boil it down to it, it's not understandable, it's inexplainable. What was the purpose? That there should be a place which can contradict God, and yet, even there, God will be comfortable and feel at home, etc. What we like to call the Hasidic lexicon, Dira Lo Yitbarech B'Tachtonim. A home for who? For God Himself. Where? B'Tachtonim. All the way down in the lowest realms. But let's try not to go off topic on this, because this really wasn't the topic of our conversation. Now, this purpose of creation, the fact that Hashem created the world in order to create a dwelling place for Hashem, is a very powerful thought to think about. The fact that we can exercise that power, and that we can actually do that and fulfill that desire is tremendous. Think about it on a physical level. Imagine if I told you, not the president, I don't like the analogy of the president, because the president is not a king. That a king, a real king from back in the day, real royalty, not the Queen of England, even that today is not really, it's royal and it's royal blood, but like, a real king is going to come and he's going to be a guest in your house. He's literally going to come and sleep in the same room as you and eat in the same eat breakfast together with you in the morning. The king himself. How ecstatic would you be? Right? How ecstatic would that make you?
I'd be nervous.
100%. But beyond being nervous, how lucky would you feel? How much would that affect you to make you a happy person? Just 2 nights ago, Gitti and I went to what's it called in Descanso Gardens where they do the lights? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Anybody knows what I'm talking about? Yeah. In Descanso Gardens for the holiday season, they make, usually it closes by dark.
Light.
What?
Display.
No, it's something to do with forest, like a forest of lights or something. I don't remember exactly. Whatever it is, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And one of the most amazing things, this is why Gitti and I go, we went last year, we went this year again, and we said we're going to go every year, is, but whatever, we'll see. Life takes you lots of different ways, but why it's something we enjoy so much, because you go there, and it's like you're transported, it's so magical, you come out and you cannot help but feel alive and feel like it's your happy place, right? What is this concept of happy place we talk about, right? Why? Because certain things make us happy, right? But those are all things that are removed from us. It's nice that you go to this place, and no matter what worries you have in your head or what mishigas is going on, right, in the world, you go there, and for some reason you become much more calm and relaxed and happy and at peace with yourself, etc. Right? So many places and things and people do this to us in this world. But why is it that it's dependent on that thing? When we leave, that thing is gone. It's because that is not in us. What we're talking about here, this experience of being in the same house as the king, right, that experience will obviously make you happy. If we can recognize that reality in our lives now, in other words, the fact that we have the power to make Hashem a reality inside us. Remember that making a home for Hashem is not at 1090 East Walnut Street, or at 165 Mar Vista, or 292 Mar Vista, or wherever it is, or on Marion, or whatever, La Cañada, whatever, all the places that we live. No. Making the world a place for Hashem, a home for Hashem, is in us. It is in our home. Hashem can live within us if we choose to make it a place for Him. That should make us extremely happy. So that's meditation number 2. Everybody with me?
Yes.
This is why, by the way, there's an interesting Talmudic quote that the Alter Rebbe quotes, which is from the tractate of Makot, where the Gemara says that there were 613 mitzvot, and then Chavakuk, who was one of the prophets, he came and he bound them all up into one, as if there's only one mitzvah. What is that mitzvah? Because in Chavakuk, he's famous for quoting, one of the most famous verses in Chavakuk is, Tzaddik b'amunato yichya, that a tzaddik, a true righteous man, lives by his faith in God. What is the Gemara saying? Why does that mean that he took all of the mitzvot and made them into one? Because true faith leads to the fulfillment of all 613 mitzvot. How does that work? That faith leads to joy. What's the bridge between faith and doing mitzvot? Right? What do you mean? If I believe in God, but I still struggle with myself, right? I believe in God, but God is not, right? And even if I believe that God is helping me overcome a struggle, but the struggle is still there. The struggle is still real. So how does that help me put on tefillin? How does that help me wake up in the morning for a minyan? I would like to think that I believe in God, and yet sometimes I sleep in the morning, and I don't come to minyan. Even though it's a mitzvah, I know that I'm with the minyan is such a beautiful thing, right? I know I always use that example, but it's a nice, very mundane, simple example that everybody can relate to without getting too personal. So how does faith affect my mitzvot? Says Alter Rebbe, the connection between those two is joy. When a person has true faith and he really believes in Hashem, that leads to joy. Joy, says the Alter Rebbe, happiness does have the power to overcome a struggle. Why do I sleep in the morning? Because I'm not properly happy. I'm not properly joyous. If I was able to meditate, to actually be truly happy, it overcomes any struggles that there are. Happiness is something, right? Many people talk about happiness as carrying them. They're floating. They're in a bubble. They're in seventh heaven. Why do we have all these descriptions of the happiness feeling of being joyous? The Gemara tells us that simcha paretz geder, that joy can break a boundary. It can literally break a boundary, right? Why is it that sometimes when we're talking to other people, we find it so hard to get along with them? There's so much. Right? There's so much friction. I want to love this person. It's a mitzvah to love a fellow Jew, but yet he's so different than me, and she's so different than me. So how could I even love them, right? Somehow, if we were truly joyous and truly happy, all that falls away. We know this, because when we are truly joyous and truly happy, all of a sudden, these mishnahs don't make a difference. Right? There are famous stories where people who wanted to make up with right, there was a huge feud between two people, and they would come over to them at the wedding of their only son, at the wedding of their firstborn son. Right? He's marrying off his child. This person is elated. He's like traveling. He's like literally floating through the air. Now you come over to him and you want to make up with him. And you say, "Come, let's be friends." It's much easier. Why? Because happiness does actually glide over and make it easier to overcome struggles.
Transcends all.
Exactly. This is why it says tzaddik b'amunato yichya. Yichya. What does yichya mean? He lives. A tzaddik lives by his faith. When a person has true faith, he lives with happiness, literally as if the dead had just been revived. He's like living this miraculous existence. We all know this from those moments when we did feel truly happy. And if we can connect with those two meditations, and we're about to learn a third meditation, to become truly happy with something that's in us and doesn't disappear ever, it doesn't change ever, right? Notice nothing that he said here is the actual action of a mitzvah. There is another mitzvah, another simcha, another joy. We call it simcha shel mitzvah, being happy from a mitzvah. But that's something that only happens when you're doing the mitzvah. If you're not doing the mitzvah, you're not happy. Right? We need to find something that's not dependent or connected to a particular action, a particular place, a particular person, a particular time. right? This is the first two meditations we spoke about. Number one, the closeness that we have with Hashem, particularly in a non-dual world. Number two, the purpose that we have in this world, the ability to make a home for Hashem within us. And number three, says the Alter Rebbe, the happiness of Hashem. We already learned earlier that when we do iskafia, which we spoke about as subduing the klippot, showing the forces of negativity, that we can subdue it and do what Hashem wants, even though there's a very powerful force that wants us to do the opposite of Hashem's will. We subdue that force, and we say we're going to do what Hashem wants. When we do that, Kohelet, in Kohelet, it talks about how Hashem has joy, ki yitron ha'or min ha'choshech, when there is an abundant light which comes from darkness. When we have that ability to be dark, Kalipa, the forces of negativity, give us that ability to be dark. They spread darkness in the world, and we choose to spread light. And as we all know, this room could be pitch dark, and if I would strike one match, the whole room would become light. Why? Because a drop of light chases away a lot of darkness. God has an intrinsic joy when we do a mitzvah, when we connect to Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe ends off with a very powerful line. That this joy bounces back and forth. Look at the bottom. I want to read it inside. I did my best to summarize it in the last bullet. That a Jew should rejoice, right? We should be happy. Why should we be happy? What's a good meditation to be happy? Because Hashem is happy. And why is Hashem happy? He is joyous because of what we do, because of the mitzvah that we do, and the fact that we exist, and the fact that we are making this world a place for Hashem. Let's read it inside. At the end of chapter 33, page 377. The Alter Rebbe is quoting a verse. Right? The Tanya offers a scriptural hint to the idea that we can share some of God's joy. V'zeu shekatuv, this is the meaning of the verse. I'm towards the bottom of page 377. Yismach Yisrael ba'osa, let Israel rejoice in its maker. We should be happy because of Hashem's happiness. This, what's the meaning of this verse in Psalms? Says the Alter Rebbe that everyone who is of the seed of Israel, in other words, any Jewish people, yesh lo nismach b'simchat Hashem. We should be joyous because of God's joy. Asher sas, since God rejoices, why is God so happy? Greatly in making His home in the lowest of worlds, namely in the real physical world. I see it all the way down here. In other words, it bounces back and forth, that joy, because joy is contagious. So if we can meditate on how happy Hashem is, we can recognize how happy, right? One of the things we all know that made us happy as children is when we came home with a good report card. We saw our parents happy, right? Why were you so happy when you got a good mark in your report card? Anybody? Yeah, it's an achievement. Yes, it's something you did. But that feeling that you're going to be able to bring this home and your mother's going to give you a hug or your father's going to give you, you know that they're going to be happy, makes you happy, right? That feeling that Hashem is happy because we're happy, and we're happy because Hashem is happy, is an unbelievable meditation. It can be very, very powerful.
Very synergistic.
Exactly. It's very exactly. Synergistic is a good word. And between that synergy affects us on a very deep level. And all three of these meditations help us to tap into a happiness which is intrinsic. It's deep within us. It's at our core. It's not something that's removed from us. It's not something that's dependent on a time, a place, a person, an action. Not at all. It's a happiness that's deeply connected with us. And that's why feeling God is feeling joy. With this we conclude chapter 33 of Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, feeling God, feeling joy.